Relatives and friends, as we begin our services, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them in a silent mode. Thank you.
As a mother has compassion for her children, so may Adonai our God have compassion for all the family and friends of Yetta Goldman who we come here to remember this day. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers in the field. The wind passes over us and we are no more. But we trust that Adonai's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service by reciting Psalms, thus linking Yetta's life to our ancient tradition, to the Jewish people, and to the eternity of God.
Shir Lamalot Ezri meim Adonai ose shamayim v'aretz al yitein lamot raglecha al yanum shomerecha hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yomam HaShemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikora yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam.
I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? This is a question the psalmist asked thousands of years ago, perhaps at a time of sorrow like this one. And here was his answer. My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, if your guardian will not slumber. For the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from harm and guard your soul. For Adonai guards your going out and coming in, now and forever. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echzar. Bino desha yarbit seini amei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi eshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeis al mavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha heme nachamuni. Taroch lefanai shochan neged sorarai. Dishanta v'Hashem roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirefuni koyemei chayai, v'shavtu b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim.
Those are the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, a psalm that we know so well from settings such as this. We sometimes call it the Shepherd Psalm, and I'm sure that many of you know it from memory. So recite with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today is the last day of the month of Av. On the Jewish calendar, Av is a month associated with loss. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, marks so many sad occasions in Jewish history. But according to tradition, from the 9th of Av and on, the month has a different name. It is called Menachem Av, the consolation of Av. The operative words are those from the Haftorah, from the book of Isaiah, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, comfort, comfort, my people. After loss, we seek comfort as a people, or when the loss is more personal, as a family. The comfort we seek can often be found in good memories. So today, we'll hear some of those very good memories from members of Yetta's family. Joel will speak first as a son, Bonnie as a niece and more, Ross, and then the grandchildren, Max, Jess, Lee, Neil, and Isabel. Joel?
So, no matter what anybody thinks of what I'm about to say, I know my mother would say, it was just wonderful. I have to thank Lynn for providing that comment. And before I actually start, I want to say a very heartfelt thank you to my sister Debbie for being her primary caregiver for the past few years and taking care of her. She did a wonderful job. If you had a Yelp page, Mommy would have given you 5 stars, and she would have said the food was wonderful, and the portions were large, and it was just delicious, and the service impeccable. So I know you're going to hear a lot about how wonderful my mother was, and she was such, and how great she was to everybody. And it is true. She was a great friend to many, a wonderful sister, aunt, and bubby. Everyone loved her truly, and she loved everyone in return. I truly believe she made the term bubby cool again. Kids are always told, follow your dreams, the world is yours. But in our house, it wasn't so much follow your dreams as it was survival. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked hard, often 2 jobs. But my mom went to work full-time when we were all very young. It was very uncommon back then to have 2-income household. Our neighborhood was filled with kids who had moms at home. Our mom was at work, and in the process became a trendsetter and a model for the 3 of us. This was our normal, preparing dinner, emptying the dishwasher, walking and feeding the dog, playtime as a constant routine of interruptions so we could all eat together as a family. I didn't know it at the time, but a work ethic and a parenting ethic was being formed that would carry me through the rest of my life. We were surrounded by kids and families that had stuff, cool bikes, color TVs, mini cycles, you name it. My mom tried as hard as she could to make sure we had some of these things too. But basically we had to get a job and work for whatever else we wanted. However, she helped tremendously. All of my early jobs were the direct result of my mom's intervention. She had so many friends and contacts, there was always a job she was telling me about and who to call to get it. I learned early on it isn't what you know, but who you know. Another life lesson learned. I wasn't the most aggressive go-getter that you see here today in front of you. I took all the help my mom was willing to give me. I remember one time when I was briefly in the life insurance business, my mom gave me a list of all the Airco sales guys, and I sold some of them life insurance. They all loved my mom so much, they were happy to buy life insurance from me. This is the impact my mom had on everyone. She was so good and so thoughtful and treated everyone like they were royalty. No one had any problem returning the love. My mother instilled a love for family and friends in all of us. All of us have decades-long relationships with second, third, fourth cousins, and a direct result of the work my mother put in their own relationships. But it really wasn't work, it was who she was. My mother's lifelong friendships was something to behold. We love my parents' friends like they were our own family, and my relationship with my parents' friends' kids I cherish as well. Lynn and I brought these values to our own family as we raised our children into adults who now look at friends as extensions of their family as well. When it came to family and friends with my mom and us as well, the bigger the better. This is what my mother taught us. Love of family, love of friends, the value of traditions, and never turn your back on anyone. Mom, you were an inspiration to the three of us and our families. Everything we are today, we learned from you. All I can say is I hope we lived up to your expectations and were able to fill your very large shoes. In the history of the Jewish people, there aren't that many Jews that were considered saints, but I can honestly say, Mom, you were a saint. There's a big hole in our world, and we can only fill it with your memory. Thank you.
Bonnie?
I want to start by speaking about the relationship that my Aunt Puppy and my mom Roz had. They had a very close and a very special relationship. Aunt Puppy married my Uncle Eddie Goldman, my father's brother. My mom and aunt became sisters-in-law, but they were never merely sisters-in-law. They were sisters in the true sense of the word. Their connection was incredibly special and deep, and the bond they shared went beyond a typical sister-in-law connection. It exemplified the essence of sisterhood. My aunt and mom spoke all the time, and there was never a crossword between them. They shared everything, and their love was immense for each other. Our families spent a lot of time together while my sister and I were growing up. Family dinners, all the Jewish holidays, birthday celebrations, and we lived a stone's throw away. One of my favorite family memories is when we cooked together ahead of our Passover dinners at my sister's home, a multi-generational gathering. In the earlier years, it only included my mom, my sister, my Aunt Puppy, my Bubby and Nana, and our great Aunt Pearl, who was my Bubby's sister. When my sister had children, Shira, Eliza, and Dari, they joined the group. And then my own boys, Sam and Dave, joined, and eventually Sam's wife, Ariel. My son, Dave, who couldn't be here because he's ill today, said when he thinks of Aunt Puppy, he can see her and my mom sitting on the antique chair in my sister's living room, and how empty that chair is going to feel. Generations passed on, and new generations took over. 1 second, please. This and other memories underscore the unity and the love that existed within our extended family. Aunt Puppy and Uncle Eddie often did things with my parents and our children. To name just a handful, Aunt Puppy attended Grandparents' Day at my children's elementary school. She and my mom visited my nieces Dari and Eliza in New York City 20 years ago, traveling on the New Jersey Transit. They went to Chinatown, the Tenement Museum, and the girls told me how much Aunt Puppy loved it. Aunt Puppy loved learning, reading, and everything like that. They had an exhibit at the Tenement Museum on cupping, and Aunt Puppy was so happy because she remembered the Yiddish word for it. They really had a wonderful time. She and Uncle Eddie also went with my parents to visit my niece Shira on visiting day at her camp. Over the years, my aunt and I would take each other out on our birthdays to celebrate and spend one-on-one time together. Made my mother a little crazy, but we did it. Our lunches eventually expanded. It included my sister, Shira, Mom, Debbie, and Susan when she was in town, and we always look forward to these outings. 6 weeks ago, on my father's birthday, July 6th, Aunt Puppy came to visit me with the beach. Maureen, who was helping her, graciously drove her to me. We had the most special day together. We were reminiscing, and she brought up a weekend where she actually stayed at our house for the weekend to babysit my son, Sam. My mom had to go to work. She told me she was so upset because my parents came over on Sunday, and she wanted Sam all to herself. So we had a good laugh. When my mom passed away 3 years ago, it was a horrible loss for my aunt. We started to speak more often, and she became my confidant and friend. I often slipped and called her Mom, and she would say, "You can call me Mom," and I did. We texted a lot. I sent pictures of the kids and my granddaughter for her to enjoy. She told me last week she wasn't feeling well, and we texted almost daily and spoke several times. Even though she was not feeling well, she still wanted to hear everything that was happening with my boys because she knew they had been sick. Aunt Puppy's selflessness, her inquisitiveness, her beauty left a lasting impact on me and all the lives that she touched. Her passing has left a deep void, and the feeling of loss for me personally is like losing my mom all over again. Cherishing these memories and the moments shared will serve as a source of comfort and a reminder of the love that bound our family together. Thank you.
It's okay. Ross, come.
Well, Debbie asked me to come and speak for her, and I will try to be brief. My partner will tell you that if I am, it'll be the first time in 40 years. I do want to say on my own behalf that, and Debbie's, that, and you're going to hear this and you're going to hear it over and over again, that she only saw the good in people. She only saw the good, which frustrated her children immensely throughout their childhood. And she would just, well, but the person is marvelous. But the person looked so good. The person was so nice. And as I sat there in the receiving line, every single one of you that she knew, she actually loved. She actually talked positively about every single one of you. And both the kids and myself, and I'm sure Michael, never, ever, ever heard her say a bad word about anybody. And if you convinced her about something bad, she'd say, "Really? I never noticed that." And then a week later, if you said, "Well, they did it again," she'd say, "Did what?" "And Mom, didn't you see that the way they looked at me?" And she'd say, "No, they're so sweet." And she'd forget. And it wasn't based on dementia or age. She did that 50 years ago. And that was her life. A woman that lost her mother early in life, who yearned for her mother and missed her mother, yet she was a great mother herself. She created the role. Debbie wanted me to talk about their relationship together. And I could not speak more eloquently than Joel or Bonnie just did. And Joel really spoke for not only himself, but his sisters as well. But Joel, you thanked Debbie for that, and both of us appreciate that, but it wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary because Debbie's relationship with her mother, though exceptionally strong, was made stronger by the illness. It was made stronger by her desire to help her mother. It was made stronger by having to go to ShopRite every Saturday and find 14 ounces of frozen vegetables. Don't bring back 12. And they don't make 14 ounces anymore. And we had to go through the stock and bring me lactate cottage cheese. Who ever heard of lactate cottage cheese? And we had to find it, and there it was in the very corner. And we would go shopping for her. And it might be a burden as a son-in-law to have to then go and take those groceries and go to Mount Laurel and drop them off and then have to sit there. And of course, it was never cool in that house because it was freezing no matter what temperature it was. But I look back on it, and it really was a highlight of my life as well. But Debbie, in the end, would cook for the last couple of years, would cook meals, we'd always, if we had steak, there was an extra steak. If we had lamb chops, there was an extra. I used to say, your mother never ate this well in her entire life. And we would deliver the meals and pick up the empty containers. And Yetta would call Debbie her Meals on Wheels. And they used to go shopping, and when those days stopped, they'd sit at her house and go shopping on the internet. They used to go out to movies or to theater, and in those days shop, they'd watch it on TV. There's a saying in Judaism when someone dies, and you say that may their memory be a blessing. Well, I know on behalf of Debbie, Michael, Susan, and Joel, her life was our blessing. And I know her memory will be, but it's important to emphasize 13 years of living on 10% heart function. Our doctor, Dr. Weinberg, who's here, Howard, telling us that maybe she has a year to live. And we'd look at our phones, and Debbie would see her mother was in Wilmington, Delaware. And oh my God, what's she doing in Wilmington, Delaware? And Mom, are you okay? What are you doing in Wilmington? She says, Rhoda and I decided to go to the Hotel DuPont for lunch. She had 10% heart function. And she went out to dinner the night she fell. That was Yetta. And I just want to say two more things. I promise to be short. If she was sitting in this room today, and I'm sure her spirit's with us, and she's looking down at us, hopefully next to her mother and to our son Brian, she would say, all of you look marvelous. Every single one of you. Look how nice. They were so nice to come. They are just marvelous. Well, we all can say, Mom, Puppy, Yetta, you are marvelous. When my mother retired, well, actually, I want to say two more things. First time I saw my father cry was when I told him at 14 that my grandfather had died. And he looked at me, and I never saw my father cry. And he looked at me and said, the greatest man that I ever knew. For a son-in-law to say that about his father-in-law. And I can honestly say that when I heard that Yetta died, I was there, but when I knew she was dying, I cried. And I thought to myself, one of the two greatest ladies I've ever met in my life. When my mother retired, there was a retirement luncheon. And, you know, at retirement luncheons, they talk about how wonderful the person is. And my father, who loved my mother madly, hit me on the shoulder and said, you see everything they're saying about her? And I said, yeah. He says, they say that about everybody at a retirement luncheon. But in the case of your mother, it's all true. Well, I can honestly say that at Jewish funerals, as we all know, everybody's a saint. Everybody was great. Everybody lived a great life. Everybody loved their children. But in the case of Yetta, Puppy, Chernoff, Goldman, it was true.
Max, Jess, Lee, Neil, Isabel.
So usually in the past, I feel like I've been good with writing and putting my thoughts into words, but I feel like this week, I feel like just at a loss of how to truly express the impact that my bubby has had in my life. So I'm just gonna keep it short and express as best as I can the impact that she's had. Every memory, every moment in my life, Bubby was there. Not only was she there, but she was one of my biggest supporters, whether she understood what I was studying or the career choice I made. She would always just nod her head and be like, yeah, I understand, and I trust you. And she would listen, and she would try to learn as best she could. Though Bubby was the youngest in her family and really was the baby of her family, she really grew into the matriarch of ours. The love we all had for her was endless. And the role she had in our family was truly significant, and we wouldn't want it any other way. I'm truly honored to have been loved by her. I'm truly honored to have had her in my life.
As our bubby was passing away on Sunday, our aunt played Edelweiss from The Sound of Music, one of her favorite songs. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, every morning you greet me, small and white, clean and bright, you look happy to meet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow. If one can ignore Rodgers and Hammerstein's intended theme of Austrian patriotism for just a moment, these lyrics can serve as a reminder of Bubby's most adamant desire for those around her to be happy, to bloom, and to grow. A shared core memory of us grandkids is Bubby taking us to theater in Philadelphia. We saw everything from Little Red Riding Hood to Fiddler on the Roof, Les Mis to independent plays. She immersed us in the culture she valued because she wanted us to learn and grow. In more recent years, her ability to travel became much more limited, and it became our time to immerse her in the culture we grew to value. From taking her to gay films to bringing over Malaysian food, this 90-something-year-old woman never ceased to amaze us with her willingness to try new things and take new ideas into consideration. Even if she did not enjoy what we introduced her to, she would always at least say, "It was very interesting." She felt blessed that we simply immersed her into our lives. This week has been very hard for me personally in ways I was not expecting. I prepared myself for sadness, but instead, I just felt an emptiness. However, after sharing memories with loved ones, I realized that we will continue to feel her energy as we find new ways to learn, to explore, and to love each other. We love you, Bubby, and we are so grateful to have called you not just our grandmother, but also our dear friend.
Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Clearly, there is much comfort for family and friends and all those meaningful memories that you've shared. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami are words that come from the prophet Isaiah. They were spoken at a time when our people were forced to leave their homeland more than 2,500 years ago. And that experience was repeated again and again throughout Jewish history. Yetta's parents left their home in Minsk, Russia, to escape pogroms, and they walked across Europe, carrying Yetta's older sister, Sarah. They came to this country, to New York, where Yetta's aunt lived with her children. Yetta's brothers, Jacob and Bernie, were born in this country, as was Yetta, the baby of the family. Because they began their time here in this country near their aunt and uncle and their children, all of the cousins grew close as one family, and Yetta became the prime mover in maintaining those very close connections over the years. By word and by example, she made this clear. You go to every simcha. You are there for every sorrow. It's a value that's been maintained through the generations, and that's why there are fourth cousins here today who have traveled great distances to be here. What could be more comforting? Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Yetta's parents moved to Philadelphia, where they had a little grocery store at 22nd and Carpenter. The family lived above the store. It was a duplex. The neighbors became close, very close. Yetta literally married the boy next door, Edward. They grew up together. It happened like this. Yetta was a kid, maybe 11, 12 years old, when Edward enlisted in the Army during World War II at age 17. He came back after participating in the landing at Normandy and fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, and the little girl next door was now a young woman. And because Edward had left high school to enlist, he needed to study for his GED. Yetta tutored him in math. They married when Yetta was 18 years old and made a marriage of 55 years. It was really a marriage of two families because Yetta's family and Edward's lived so close to each other, as did the extended family, and that too became a source of comfort. Nachamu, nachamu. Yetta and Edward were devoted to their children, Susan, Debbie, and Joel. When the kids were old enough to take care of themselves, she went back to work, as we heard, outside the home. She was a bookkeeper at first, and then she took a job as a secretary at the Pennypacker Park Synagogue, which later became Beth Tfilah Israel Beth Judah. Over the years, Yetta also became the sisterhood president and the president of the congregation. She was instrumental in creating a friends group at the synagogue, and that became central in the social life for Yetta and Edward, and the friendships lasted. Isabel recalled asking her bubby not too long ago what she was doing for New Year's Eve, and Yetta's response was, "The gang and I are getting together for cocktails." That gang remained close throughout all the years. They shared many good times, comforted one another through the inevitable losses. Nachamu, nachamu. And these relationships also led to friendships among the children of the gang, and those friendships continue, a lasting legacy. And of course, Yetta's involvement in the synagogue was not just professionally and as an officer of the congregation. In fact, Susan was the first bat mitzvah at the synagogue, and for all of the children, Hebrew school and holiday celebrations were a given. Now, we noted that Yetta went back to work when the kids were able to care for themselves, and this meant that they all had to take on responsibilities at home. Notes with assignments were left each day, but there were some standard chores. Joel had to put food items in the oven. Susan had a note that consisted of 4 letters, MTDW, empty the dishwasher. Debbie was responsible for cleaning the bathrooms, and both girls were responsible for calling in Joel from his touch football games on the street in order to do his job. They would yell out to him, "Joel, time to put in the potatoes." And Joel, the way he remembers it, was that he was about to start a play in the football game, and he'd say, "Hut, hut," and then it would be, "Joel." There was a lot of laughter as we sat together and shared those memories, a lot of comfort, too. Nachamu, nachamu. And there were more memories of family trips to the shore, to Hershey Park, to D.C., mostly trips within a 2-hour drive. Resources did not permit longer, more elaborate travel. The visits to family in New York were a constant, and Yetta knew how to make the most out of every visit or vacation trip. Even if it was a rainy day at the shore, she could turn it into a good time. She pulled out games and puzzles, Scrabble, Rummikub, cards, books. And later, she would do this with the grandchildren as well, and she taught all of the girls to play mahjong. One of the things she taught you all was cleanliness. It was, in part, a byproduct of those household chores going back to when you were kids. You all became good at housekeeping. And I think one of you described your mom as the cleanliness field marshal, and Ross said you all inherited the cleanliness gene. And it was passed on to the next generation, to Max and Jess and Lee and Neil and Isabel, because whenever Bubby came over to babysit, she cleaned out and reorganized the refrigerator. One of the funniest moments in our conversation came when you all contributed to a detailed description for loading the dishwasher. Knives, forks, spoons, each in their separate compartments. Glasses on this side, other items on the other side. And you all learned the rules. some of this was traced back 4 generations. You explained that Yetta's mom passed away when she was only 14 years old, so Yetta learned many of her housekeeping and cooking skills from Edward's mother, Bertha. And again, that's the influence of close, extended family. And as we noted earlier, Yetta made sure that family remained close. Every simcha, every bar mitzvah, every bat mitzvah or wedding, every holiday gathering or birthday party, every single event was marvelous. There was always that word, marvelous. In fact, every member of the family was marvelous. Friends were marvelous too. And she really loved her siblings and her family. She spoke to Sarah and Jacob and Bernie almost daily. She was particularly close to Sarah, who was 10 years older than Yetta and became like a mother to her when their mom passed away. She referred to Sarah as the matriarch. She had her own role in that capacity. And after Sarah and her brothers passed away, Yetta stayed close with their children, everybody's Bobby, nieces, nephews, cousins. Bonnie made that very clear. Yetta was an upbeat, glasses half full person. She always looked for the good, as Ross pointed out. The worst she would say about somebody might be, well, he means well. Very positive. And that's why there are so many happy memories. And that's why when we spoke a couple days ago, there was much more laughter and many more smiles than tears. What a comfort. Nachamu, Nachamu. You also knew that you could count on her to be there when you needed her. This too was a part of her character. When her father was very much up in age, couldn't live on his own, she brought him to live in the house. Susan, you said you all learned from her kindness. Kibud av va'em, honoring parents, is something that we trace back to the Torah itself. We know that piece of the 10 Commandments very well. The Talmud asks, what does it mean, really, to honor? Is it a matter of respect and deference? No, says the Talmud, it's even more than that. It means being there to provide personal care. Yetta did that. She set an example. When there were tough times, she was a source of strength. When Brian was in the hospital, Yetta got up every morning at 6:30 to drive over from Philadelphia and sit with Ross and Debbie. She understood that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up, be there. Sometimes the greatest comfort comes not from words, simply from presence. Nachamu, Nachamu. Comfort. Yetta knew how to be a comfort. And she was a source of strength for all of you when you needed it. She was also strong personally. After Edward died in 2005, she made a life for herself. She maintained her independence. She kept up with family and friends. She weathered her own illness. She continued to live fully. She continued to work for as long as she could. At one point, she took a job as a receptionist for a urologist and began to give medical advice. Later, she took a similar position in Ross's office, in his law practice, and of course, as the receptionist and the first contact that people had, clients, when they came in or called, Yetta felt qualified to give advice and counsel. Ross says his clients loved it. They loved her. She was a character, and she had that upbeat, accepting nature that made her a pleasure. So she will be remembered fondly by many. For family, there's another source of many good memories. Yetta's love of culture, theater, opera, ballet, classical music, concerts, museums, art. All of the grandchildren remember her sharing this with them, beginning with that Little Red Riding Hood play and going on to the Nutcracker, which she went to every year, it seemed. Later it was Fiddler on the Roof and Les Mis. And when she took you out to eat at a restaurant, she would always put the reservation in the name of the grandchild rather than her own. As Isabel explained it, she taught you to go up to the maitre d' and say, table for Isabel. That too is part of culture, etiquette. She wanted to convey that. You got it, and you got her. She also loved when you came to visit at her home. If you said you would be coming over for breakfast in a few days, she'd go out to Wegmans the day before to buy bagels and lox. She'd set the table even a day before you got there. So it'd be all ready when you arrived. And even when she could no longer drive herself, and she had grudgingly accepted having an aide twice a week, she would have the aide drive her to Wegmans. There's a charming story about how you got her to give up the car. When Isabel graduated college, she decided she would give Isabel the car. But it came with conditions. Isabel would have it during the week, and she would have it on the weekends. That soon morphed into Isabel becoming her driver, driving Bubby around. She'd call Isabel and say, "Let's go out and get our nails done." How could you turn that down? Why would you turn it down? The car also became a lesson in honesty. She insisted that the Easy Pass be changed because even though it was still technically her car, Isabel was doing the driving, and it would be unfair for her to get the senior citizen discount. Bubby had her rules. Clearly, not having the car didn't slow her down very much. At age 90, she and Rona were out there on the way to Delaware. Ross referred to them as Thelma and Louise, but with a happier ending. All of this made her fun to be with and made many meaningful memories. Even as her mobility and her health declined, her positive attitude and upbeat personality persisted. Her doctors loved her, her aides, everybody. She was kind, considerate, appreciative of every visit and call from family and friends. And all of this might have continued if not for the fall. Even there at Cooper, while she was still able to communicate, she would encourage the doctors and nurses not to fuss over her. Go treat other people, they need you. She had family there. She had Debbie and Ross, and then as things took a turn, the rest of the family gathered around her. And that is the way she passed from life, surrounded by family she loved and who loved her. She leaves a legacy of love, strong values, many good and meaningful memories, which will surely continue to be an important source of inspiration and blessing in your lives for all the days and the years to come. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. We rise for a final prayer.
El male rachamim shochen v'meromim Hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina B'malot kedoshim u'torim k'zohar harakim ha'azirim Et nishmat Yetta bat Nachum lev v'shenda Shalach olama B'gan Eden tehem menuchata Anna bal rachamim Hastireh beseter kenafecha לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Yetta Goldman who has gone to her eternal home, Merciful One, we ask our loved one find perfect peace and eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
So I want to note that at the conclusion of services at the cemetery, the family will be returning to 15 Hazelhurst Drive, and all family and friends are invited to pay condolence calls there. They will be observing Shiva with services tonight and at the conclusion of Shabbat on Saturday night. Those services tonight are at 7:30 p.m.